cosmic collision. Rowan Sharma had never been late to anything in her life, except today. The day her department head had practically begged her to represent their struggling astronomy program at the city's most exclusive networking event. "It's just circuits and silicone," she muttered, frantically searching her cramped apartment for something presentable to wear. As an associate professor of astronomy at Westlake University, Rowan spent her days looking up at the vastness of space, not worrying about impressing tech investors. Her phone buzzed again. "Dr. Patterson, where are you? Potential donors are all ready." "Here." Rowan glanced at her reflection, hair piled in a messy bun, face bare of makeup, and still wearing her favorite navy blue loungewear covered in tiny silver constellations. She'd spent the entire night at the observatory monitoring a meteor shower with her graduate students and had collapsed into bed at dawn, completely forgetting about the event. "This is ridiculous," she sighed, but grabbed her keys anyway. University's astronomy program desperately needed funding. If she didn't show up, they might lose their last chance at upgrading their outdated equipment. 20 minutes later, Rowan stood at the entrance of the gleaming Horizon Tower, feeling wildly out of place among the designer suits and cocktail dresses. The security guard gave her a skeptical look. "I'm Dr. Rowan Sharma, Westlake University," she said, holding up her faculty ID. "I'm supposed to be at the Future Innovators reception." Meanwhile, on the other side of the elegant rooftop venue, Julian Hayes was contemplating his escape. As the founder of Horizon Technologies, his face was too recognizable, his name too magnetic. Every conversation felt like a transaction. People wanted his money, his connections, or the prestige of being seen with him. "Just 30 more minutes," his assistant Priya reminded him. "Then you can disappear." Julian nodded, tugging at his deliberately modest watch. At 34, he'd built a tech empire worth billions, revolutionizing sustainable energy storage. Yet here he was, introducing himself only as Jules, a software developer at Horizon, testing a theory that people might actually like him for himself. That's when he saw her, a woman in what appeared to be pajamas, decorated with stars and constellations, clutching a worn leather satchel and looking thoroughly uncomfortable. She stood out like a supernova against the calculated perfection surrounding them. Their eyes met across the room. Julian felt something shift in his carefully ordered world. Rowan approached a server, accidentally bumping into a tall man with kind eyes and a subtle smile. "Sorry," she mumbled, then gestured to her outfit with a self-deprecating laugh. "Clearly I didn't get the dress code memo." "Actually," he replied, "you're the most interesting person here. Everyone else looks exactly the same." "Dr. Rowan Sharma. I teach astronomy at Westlake." She extended her hand. "I was at the observatory all night and completely forgot about this event. Hence, ... She gestured to her constellation-covered loungewear. "Jules," he said simply, shaking her hand. "I work in tech. And honestly, I'd much rather hear about the observatory than make small talk about market projections." Rowan raised an eyebrow. "Really? Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about celestial bodies?" "Test me," he challenged with a genuine smile, for the next hour. They huddled in a quiet corner as Rowan explained her research on exoplanets and the university's struggling outreach program for underprivileged schools. Julian listened, fascinated not just by her knowledge, but by her authentic passion. "Our equipment is ancient," she sighed. "We're hoping to find donors tonight, but I doubt my stellar fashion choice is helping." "You'd be surprised," Julian said. "Authenticity is rare in places like this." When Dr. Patterson spotted Rowan in loungewear, deep in conversation with someone he didn't recognize, his face turned alarming shades of red. But before he could intervene, Rowan's phone alarm chimed. "Have to go," she said apologetically. "Early class tomorrow." "Can I call you?" Julian asked, surprising himself. Rowan hesitated, then scribbled her number on a cocktail napkin. "Fair warning, I mostly talk about stars and my students." "Perfect," Julian said, watching her leave, still clutching her napkin. But for the first time in years, he felt a genuine connection with a woman who had no idea who he really was. Gravity's pull 3 days had passed since the networking event, and Rowan was convinced she'd never hear from Jules again. who would be interested in an astronomy professor who showed up to a high-profile event in loungewear? Him-polished, articulate. Clearly successful didn't typically orbit her world. She was setting up her lecture on black holes. When her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number, "Is it inappropriate to admit I've been thinking about constellations? In pajamas for 3 days straight?" Rowan smiled despite herself. "Depends. Is this Jules from the networking disaster? The very same, though I'd call it the networking highlight? Coffee tomorrow?" She hesitated. Dating had never been her priority. The stars were far more reliable companions. But there had been something refreshingly genuine about Jules. "There's a meteor shower tomorrow night. The university observatory is hosting a public viewing. If you're actually interested in stars and not just making polite conversation, ... His response came immediately. "What time?" The following evening. Rowan was explaining the Perseid meteor shower to a group of enthusiastic children when she spotted him. Jules stood at the back of the crowd wearing jeans and a simple navy sweater, looking far more relaxed than he had at the networking event. "You came," she said, approaching him after finishing her demonstration. "I said I would." He smiled. "I admit, I had to Google what to expect at a meteor shower viewing. Honesty, I like that." Rowan led him toward a quieter telescope. "Most people pretend to know more than they do." Julian laughed, thinking of the irony. While he wasn't lying about his interest in astronomy, he was certainly omitting the fact that he owned the company that manufactured the advanced imaging chips used in many modern telescopes, including the outdated ones Westlake was desperately trying to replace. As the night progressed, Julian found himself captivated by Rowan's world. She showed him how to track meteors, explained why they appeared as shooting stars, and introduced him to her graduate students, who clearly adored her. Professor Sharma convinced the department to keep the observatory open for community education, even when they threatened budget cuts, explained Deepday, her enthusiastic doctoral student. She volunteers her weekends teaching kids from the city center schools. Julian watched Rowan blush at the praise. "It's nothing special. The universe belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford fancy education." Later, as the crowd thinned and the meteor shower reached its peak, they sat on the observatory roof, sharing a thermos of coffee. "So, Jules from Tech," Rowan said. "What do you actually do?" Julian chose his words carefully. "I work with energy storage solutions, trying to make renewable energy more practical for everyday use." "That's actually important work," she said, looking impressed. "Much more useful than my stargazing." "I disagree. What you do connecting people to the universe, inspiring wonder that matters, especially for those kids tonight who might never have seen the stars otherwise." Her conversation flowed effortlessly, from environmental science to philosophy, to their shared love of old sci-fi movies. Julian couldn't remember the last time he'd had a conversation where business, investments, or his company's stock price hadn't dominated. Over the next few weeks, they fell into an easy rhythm. Julian told his executive team he was working on a personal project, and rearranged his schedule to spend time with Rowan. They explored the city's hidden corners, a tiny bookstore specializing in scientific texts, an old planetarium Rowan had loved as a child, a rooftop garden where they watched the sunset. Julian kept his identity carefully guarded. Using his middle name and keeping details about his work vague, he told himself it was temporary. He just wanted to ensure what was growing between them was real before complications set in. For Rowan, Jules was unlike anyone she'd dated before. Listened intently when she spoke about her research, asked thoughtful questions, and never made her feel like her passion for astronomy was impractical. He was busy and sometimes mysterious about his work, but always made time for her. One evening, they were sprawled on her apartment floor, surrounded by papers as Rowan worked on her grant proposal for a community outreach program. "It's a long shot," she sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "But if we could get this funding, we could bring astronomy education to every public school in the district." Julian examined her careful budget. The amount she needed was what he might spend on a weekend. Business trip, yet to her university department, it was monumental. "You'll get it," he said, fighting the urge to simply write her a check on the spot. "Your passion is contagious." She looked up at him, her expression vulnerable. Why are you here, Jules? I mean, you could be with anyone, someone who wears actual clothes to networking events, someone more put together. Julian reached across the papers, taking her hand. Because you're real. You care more about nebulae than designer labels. You spend your weekends teaching kids to look up at the sky instead of networking for your next career move. He paused. When I'm with you, I'm just Jules. Not what I own or what I've achieved. The statement was more honest than he'd intended, and for a moment, guilt washed over him. How much longer could he maintain this partial truth? Then Rowan leaned forward and kissed him, and all thoughts of his dual identity faded. In her tiny apartment, surrounded by star charts and grant proposals, Julian Hayes, billionaire tech innovator, was simply a man falling in love with a woman who saw the universe. In everything, what neither of them noticed was the business magazine. Lying on Rowan's coffee table, delivered that morning to her department and borrowed by a colleague. On its cover, Julian's face with the headline, Horizons Hayes, the billionaire revolutionizing green tech. The truth was there, waiting to be discovered like a distant star whose light had not yet reached them. Eclipse of Truth, Professor Sharma. Have you seen this? Rowan looked up from her desk to find her department assistant Tenzin waving a magazine in her doorway. The faculty lounge's copy of Tech Innovations had been making rounds all morning. Hey, am I looking at? Rowan asked, distracted by the stack of ungraded papers before her. The man who's going to save our department, Tenzin said dramatically, placing the magazine on her desk. Julian Hayes just announced a major initiative funding STEM education. They're accepting proposals next month. Rowan glanced down, then froze. Staring back at her from the glossy cover was Julser Julesen in impeccable suit. Identified as Julian Hayes, founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies, this ... That can't be right, she whispered, scanning the article. 34 years old. Founded Horizon Technologies at 26. Revolutionary energy storage solutions. Estimated net worth, $8.7 billion. Everything aligned except the name he'd given her. The pieces clicked into place as vague answers about work, the mysterious phone calls, how he always paid for their dates in cash, his surprising technical knowledge when they'd discussed her department's equipment needs. Do you know him? Tenzin asked, noticing her stunned expression. I thought I did, Rowan said quietly. She canceled her afternoon office hours and walked to the small coffee shop where she and Jules Snow. Julian had spent countless hours talking. Her mind replayed every conversation, now filtered through. This new lens? Had anything been real? Was she just some amusing diversion for a bored billionaire? Her phone buzzed with a text from him. Dinner tonight? I found that Ethiopian place you mentioned wanting to try. Rowan stared at the message. The casual tone felt like salt in a fresh wound. She snapped a photo of the magazine cover and sent it with a single question mark. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, I can explain. Please let me. Why should I believe anything you say now? Because everything else was true, just not my name and job title. Rowan silenced her phone and headed to the observatory. The stars had always been her refuge, their distant light, a comfort in troubled times. But tonight, even they seemed to mock her with their cold brilliance. 3 hours later, she found Julian waiting outside the observatory, sitting on a bench in the cool evening air. How did you find me? She asked, keeping her distance. You always come here when you're upset. You told me that on our 3rd date. He stood but didn't approach her. Rowan. I'm sorry. For what exactly? Lying about who you are? Using me as some sort of social experiment? Was this entertaining for you, slumming it with the academic in pajamas? It wasn't like that, Julian said, his composed facade crumbling. My whole life, people have only seen my wealth, my company. When we met, you had no idea who I was. And it was ... liberating. I could just be myself. Except you weren't yourself, Rowan countered. You were Jules, the regular tech guy. Not Julian Hayes, billionaire CEO. The name was different. The man was real. He took a step toward her. Everything I told you about my thoughts, my feelings, what I care about, that was all true. Rowan shook her head. You don't get it. Shared everything with you, my struggles with the department budget, my dreams for the outreach program, how I'm barely making rent some months. And all that time you could have solved those problems with the equivalent of pocket change to you. Would you have wanted that? Julian asked. If I'd introduced myself as Julian Hayes and immediately offered to fund your department, would you have trusted my intentions? That's not the point. The point is you had a choice in this relationship, and I didn't. You decided what I got to know about you. Rowan wrapped her arms around herself. Do you know how humiliating it is to realize everyone around you probably knew who you were except me? Julian ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I was going to tell you. I've been trying to figure out how, when, after how many more weeks of me sharing my struggles while you sat there, knowing you could fix everything with a phone call? Her words hit their mark. Julian's expression fell as the reality of his deception sank in. I never meant to hurt you, he said softly. When we met, it was just going to be one conversation. But then I wanted to see you again and again, and it became harder to find the right moment to tell you the truth. Rowan finally looked at him directly, her eyes bright. With unshed tears? The worst part is, I was falling in love with you. With Jules, the thoughtful guy who listened to me ramble about star formation and didn't check his phone during my lectures. She swallowed hard. But Julian Hayes? I don't know him at all. You do know me, he insisted. Jules is who I am. When all the noise falls away, when I'm not being Julian Hayes, CEO for the world. Maybe, but relationships aren't built on half-truths. Rowan turned toward the observatory entrance. I need time to think. Rowan, please. Goodbye, Julian. The door closed behind her with quiet finality. For the next 2 weeks, Julian respected her request for space, though it tortured him. He threw himself into work. Reviewing the education initiative his team had been developing, the one he'd planned to tell Rowan about once it was finalized. Now it felt hollow without her insight. Rowan, meanwhile, buried herself in end-of-semester grading in her research. She ignored the pitying glances from colleagues who had connected the dots between her mysterious boyfriend, the famous tech mogul. The university president had even summoned her, clearly hoping she might leverage the connection for donations, a meeting she'd promptly canceled. Late one night, Deep Tea found her in the lab, bleary-eyed and surrounded by data. You know her? Student said carefully. My cousin works at Horizon's R&D department. She says Hayes has been impossible lately. Canceled his appointments, working through the night. That's not my concern, Rowan said stiffly. She also said he's pushing through a major education initiative focused on astronomy programs in underfunded schools. Deepti gave her a meaningful look. Just thought you should know. That night, Rowan lay awake, remembering Julian's face. When she'd accused him of treating her like an experiment, the genuine hurt in his eyes hadn't seemed fake. She thought of all the times he'd listened intently to her dreams for astronomy education, asking questions about impact and implementation questions. That, in retrospect, came from someone who knew exactly how to turn visions into reality. Had she overreacted? Perhaps, but the gulf between their worlds suddenly seemed unbridgeable. Julian Hayes moved through life with wealth and influence she could barely comprehend. While she scrapped for department funding and lived in a one-bedroom apartment filled with secondhand furniture, what future could they possibly have, even if she forgave his deception? As dawn broke, Rowan made her decision. She would focus on what she could control: her work, her students, the upcoming department fundraiser. Julian Hayes and his billions belonged to another universe altogether, one she had no place in. What she didn't know was that Julian had already set in motion a plan that would bring their worlds crashing back together, in a way neither of them could have anticipated. Celestial Navigation, the annual Westlake University Science Department fundraiser, was usually a modest, fair lukewarm, hors d'oeuvres, faculty in their best but dated formal wear, and a handful of loyal alumni writing small checks. This year, however, the event had been mysteriously upgraded to the grand ballroom at the Everett Hotel. With rumors of major potential donors in attendance, Rowan stood uncomfortably in a borrowed dress, nursing a glass of champagne she couldn't afford. 3 weeks had passed since she'd last seen Julian. And while the sharp pain had dulled to an ache, she still found herself searching crowds for his face. "You clean up nicely, Professor," Dr. Patterson said, approaching with barely contained excitement. "Though I'm still not sure why you turned down a meeting with the university president. He was quite eager to discuss ... connections." "I don't have connections," Rowan replied flatly, "and I don't appreciate being valued for who I might know rather than my work." Dr. Patterson's retort was cut short by a commotion near the entrance. Cameras flashed to security personnel, created a pathway through the suddenly buzzing crowd. Rowan's heart stopped when she saw him. Julian. He was walking into the ballroom, but not in the tailored suit she would have expected. Instead, he wore deep blue loungewear covered in silver constellations, almost identical to what she'd worn the night they met. His hair was slightly tousled, his expression nervous but determined. A horrified university administrator rushed forward. "Mr. Hayes, we weren't informed. Is everything all right with your attire?" "Perfectly fine," Julian replied, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'm dressed for the stars tonight." The crowd parted as he made his way directly to where Rowan stood frozen. "You're making a scene," she whispered when he reached her, acutely aware of every eye in the room on them. "Good." His voice was soft but steady. "I've spent my life avoiding scenes, being careful, calculating every move. It's exhausting." Before she could respond, Dr. Patterson swooped in, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mr. Hayes, what an honor. We had no idea you would be attending personally." "I wouldn't miss it," Julian said politely, never taking his eyes off Rowan. "Would you mind if I borrowed Professor Sharma for a moment?" "What?" Not waiting for an answer, he gently guided Rowan to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "What are you doing?" "Here?" she asked, still processing his appearance. "And why are you dressed like that?" "You showed up exactly as you were that night," Julian said. "No pretense, no facade. It was the bravest thing I'd ever seen." He took a deep breath. "I'm just trying to be as brave as you." Before Rowan could respond, a university official approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an unexpected but most welcome guest tonight. Mr. Julian Hayes of Horizon Technologies has a special announcement." Julian squeezed her hand before walking toward the stage.
Ow.
"Just listen, please." The room fell silent as he took the microphone, still in his star-patterned loungewear. "Thank you for having me tonight," he began. "Many of you are probably wondering about my attire. The truth is, it's a tribute to someone who taught me an important lesson about authenticity." Rowan felt heat rise to her face as several heads turned in her direction. 3 months ago, I met a brilliant astronomy professor who showed up to a networking event wearing pajamas covered in constellations. She didn't care what anyone thought. She was too busy caring about expanding access to science education and showing children the wonders of the universe. He paused, looking directly at Rowan. "That night changed me. For weeks I was just Jules, not a CEO or a billionaire, just a man captivated by a woman who saw magic in the stars. I made a mistake by not being completely honest about my identity, and I lost her trust." Murmurs spread through the crowd as people connected the dots. Rowan wanted to disappear, but found herself unable to look away from Julian. "Tonight, I'm here to announce that Horizon Technologies is establishing the Celestial Access Initiative. With an initial endowment of $50 million dedicated to astronomy education in underserved communities." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Dr. Patterson looked like he might faint. "The flagship program will be based here at Westlake University, with Professor Rowan Sharma as the director if she accepts." Julian's voice softened. "This isn't an attempt to buy forgiveness. It's about honoring a vision that deserves support, regardless of our personal relationship." He stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause, making his way back to where Rowan stood, stunned. "You can say no to the position," he said quietly, now standing before her. "But the funding stays either way. Your department will choose. Another director, if you prefer." "Why?" Rowan finally managed, her voice barely audible over the continuing applause. "Because you were right. I could have helped all along, and I didn't." His eyes held hers steadily, but more importantly, because it matters to you. And you matter to Jules or Julian. It's always been the same person loving you. The word loving hung between them. I can't be bought, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I know that better than anyone. A small smile touched his lips. You're the woman who lectured a billionaire for 45 minutes about light pollution without knowing who he was. The last thing I'd ever try to do is buy you. Despite herself, Rowan felt a laugh bubble up. It was at least an hour lecture. 57 minutes. I timed it because I didn't want it to end. Round them, people were openly staring. But for once, Julian didn't seem to notice or care. I'm still angry, Rowan admitted, and confused. And I have no idea how this could possibly work between us. Neither do I, Julian said honestly. Our worlds are different. But maybe that's not a bad thing. You keep me grounded. I can help your ideas reach farther. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook, one she recognized as the journal she'd seen him scribbling in during their dates. For weeks I've been taking notes on everything you've said about astronomy education. Ideas for mobile observatories for rural schools. Interactive curriculum for different age groups. Community star-watching events. He handed her the notebook. This initiative isn't my vision, it's yours. I just provided resources. Rowan flipped through pages of his meticulous notes, seeing her casual comments captured and expanded upon. With implementation details and budgeting, you were planning this all along? Not exactly. At first I was just fascinated by your passion. Then I started thinking about how to help. By the time I realized I was falling in love with you, these notes had become a blueprint for something that could actually change lives. A tear slipped down Rowan's cheek. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider directing the initiative. It needs you. Shh. Julian hesitated. Say, you'll give me the real me. Name and all another chance. Was frantically waving, clearly desperate to discuss the monumental donation. Other faculty members were not so subtly inching closer to eavesdrop. People are watching, Rowan murmured. Let them, Julian said, taking her hand. I'm done hiding who I am and what I want. Looking up at him, this powerful man standing vulnerable in constellation pajamas. Rowan felt the walls she'd built beginning to crumble. I need time, she said finally. Not to decide about the initiative, of course I want to be involved. But us. It's more complicated. Julian nodded, disappointed but understanding. Take all the time you need. He started to step away, but Rowan held on to his hand. But maybe, she said softly, we could start with dinner. Somewhere quiet where we can really talk. The smile that spread across Julian's face was worth every whisper, every stare in the ballroom. I know just the place, he said, and I promise no more secrets. As they walked out together, Rowan knew they faced a constellation of challenges. But for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps their different worlds weren't irreconcilable after all that maybe. Just maybe, they could navigate this uncharted territory together. Constellation of love 6 months had passed since the night of the fundraiser, and Rowan's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The Celestial Access Initiative was flourishing beyond her wildest dreams, with mobile observatories, now visiting schools across 3 districts and a waiting list of enthusiastic teachers, eager to participate. Today she stood in the nearly completed Horizon Observatory and Education Center, watching workers install the massive state-of-the-art telescope that would soon give underprivileged students access to views of the cosmos they'd never before experienced. Professor Sharma, construction manager, approached with a tablet. We need your approval on the final layout for the children's interactive zone. Rowan reviewed the plans, suggesting a few adjustments to make the space more accessible for younger children. This was her domain now, perfect blend of academic expertise and practical education that utilized her talents in ways her university position never had. Her phone chimed with a text from Julian, meeting running late. Still. On for tonight? Wouldn't miss it, she replied. It's a special day. Indeed, it was exactly 6 months since they'd begun again, this time with complete honesty between them. The journey hadn't been easy. Dating one of the world's most eligible bachelors meant paparazzi, public scrutiny, and constant speculation about their relationship in tabloids and tech blogs. The Billionaire and the Stargazer, one headline had read, another less flattering one, Hayes' latest, slumming with science professor. Those early weeks had been a trial by fire, with Rowan questioning whether their worlds could ever truly mesh. Julian had been patient, giving her space when needed, while slowly introducing her to his reality board meetings and investor dinners. Charity galas always, making it clear that she belonged by his side exactly as she was. For her part, Rohan had insisted that Julian experience her world fully, to grading papers late into the night, eating ramen in her tiny apartment, attending faculty meetings where budget concerns dominated every conversation. To her surprise, he'd embraced it all with genuine interest. "You know what I love about your world?" He'd told her one night as they sat on her fire escape, watching stars appear over the city. "Everyone cares about something bigger than themselves. It's refreshing." Gradually, they'd found their rhythm, creating a shared life that honored both their worlds rather than forcing either to abandon theirs. Julian had even started teaching a guest seminar on sustainable technology at Westlake, donating his time rather than money, something that earned him respect from her colleagues in a way his billions never could. Tonight marked another milestone. Julian had asked her to meet him at his penthouse for a special dinner, just the two of them, no assistants, no interruptions. "Thinking about tonight?" Deep T asked, catching Rowan's distant expression as they reviewed curriculum materials. "Is it that obvious?" Rowan smiled, only to everyone with eyes. Deep D grinned. "You've been checking your watch every 5 minutes?" Rowan laughed. "I'm just excited to see him. With both our schedules lately, quality time has been scarce." "I still can't believe how normal you two are," Deep T marveled. "When the richest man in tech shows up at department potlucks with homemade samosas, it defies all logic. Trust me, I'm as surprised as anyone." Rowan gathered her materials. "But that's who he really is when all the pressure falls away." The Julian behind the headlines. Later that evening, Rowan arrived at Julian's building, where the staff now greeted her by name. The first few times she'd visited, she'd felt like an imposter in this world of marble floors and uniformed doormen. She moved through these spaces with quiet confidence. When the private elevator opened to Julian's penthouse, she found the lights dimmed, the space transformed. A path of tiny LED lights mimicking stars led through the apartment toward the terrace. "Julian?" she called, following the twinkling trail. She gasped when she stepped onto the terrace. The entire space had been transformed into a miniature planetarium. Thousands of tiny lights created constellations overhead. And in the center stood Julian, wearing the same star-patterned loungewear from the fundraiser. "What is all this?" she asked, taking in the breathtaking scene. "6 months ago, you gave me a second chance," he said, taking her hands. "But really, you've been changing my life since the night we met. The night you showed up exactly as you were, with no pretense." On a small table nearby, she noticed 2 sets of star-patterned loungewear laid out, one clearly for her. "Are we having a pajama party?" She laughed. In a manner of speaking, Julian's eyes were warm, but nervous. "Thought we could be completely ourselves tonight." He gestured to a changing screen set up in the corner. Curious, Rowan changed into the soft loungewear which fit perfectly. When she emerged, Julian had prepared 2 glasses of champagne. "Perfect," he said softly. "Now we match." "This is wonderful," Rowan said, "but what's the occasion?" Julian took a deep breath. "Remember how we met? Both of us pretending to be something we weren't? You in your pajamas at a formal event, me hiding my identity?" Rowan nodded, smiling at the memory that no longer held pain. "These past 6 months, we've been building something real. No hiding, no pretending." He took her hand, "And I've realized something important. When I'm with you, I'm the person I always wanted to be, but was afraid to become." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rowan's breath caught as he dropped to one knee beneath the canopy of artificial stars. "Rowan Sharma, you walked into my life in pajamas and taught me that authenticity is the greatest gift we can offer each other." His voice wavered slightly. "I love how you see the wonder in everything, how you fight for what matters, how you've never once been impressed by what I own, but always by what I believe." He opened the box to reveal not a traditional diamond, but a stunning ring with a center stone that seemed to contain the universe itself, blues and purples swirling with specks of light surrounded by smaller twinkling stones. It's a rare celestial opal, he explained, with diamond constellations that match the sky on the night we met. Tears filled Rowan's eyes as he continued. I'm asking if you'll marry me, not Julian Hayes, the billionaire, but just Julian, the man who falls more in love with you every time you explain a nebula or fight for your students or show up exactly as you are. For a moment, Rowan was speechless, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them here from a chance meeting in mismatched clothes to this moment of perfect symmetry. When we met, she finally said, I never imagined my life could expand to include your world. And I worried that to be with you, I'd have to become someone else. She touched his face gently. But you never asked me to change. Instead, you built bridges between our worlds. She smiled through her tears. Julian? Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it caught the light like a miniature galaxy. As he stood and pulled her into his arms, the artificial stars above them seemed to pulse brighter. There's one more surprise, he whispered. Pressing a button on a remote, the ceiling of the terrace suddenly retracted, revealing the actual night. Sky above, clear and brilliant with real stars shining down on them. How did you manage that? Rohan gasped, looking up at the unexpected view. I may have purchased the building and modified some architecture, Julian admitted with a sheepish smile. I wanted us to have real stars for this moment. Rowan laughed, shaking her head in amazement. Only you would renovate an entire penthouse. For a proposal? Too much? He asked, suddenly uncertain. No, she said softly, drawing him closer. It's perfectly USA, a little over the top, a little unconventional, and completely sincere. As they stood together beneath both artificial and real stars, Rowan reflected on the cosmic coincidence that had brought them together, a forgotten networking event. Constellation Pajamas, and the courage to be authentic in a world that rarely rewarded it. Their story had never been about a billionaire and a professor finding common ground. It had been about two people recognizing in each other something genuine and worth fighting for, a connection that transcended social expectations and economic divides. What are you thinking? Julian asked, noticing her contemplative expression. That the universe has a strange way of aligning stars, she replied, resting her head against his chest. And that sometimes the most unexpected orbits create the most beautiful constellations. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, a cosmic punctuation to their promise. Neither made a wish. They didn't need to. Everything they wanted was already right here, in a penthouse where two worlds had finally, perfectly become one. In the warm glow of their embrace, Rowan realized that true love wasn't about perfect compatibility or shared backgrounds. It was about creating a new universe together, one where differences became strengths and authenticity. It was the brightest star in their shared constellation.